Hey, what's up? I'm Mike Squires. This is Couch's podcast episode number 149. My guest on this episode, Taylor Cox of Amplified Nation. I had a great time talking with Taylor. He sort of took me through the beginning of his amp building, well, cabinet building first, and then how he transitioned into amp building. And it's a cool story. And he's a hell of a nice guy. And I really enjoyed talking to him. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Because it's a good time, isn't it? Speaking of good times, thank you to all the people who are helping me keep the good times rolling by being patrons over at Patreon. So if you enjoy the Couchers podcast, please, by all means, consider supporting over at Patreon, patreon.com/Couchers. Thank you to everyone who's already been supporting over there. Thank you very much to River City Guitars in Spokane, Washington. RiverCityGuitars.com, at River City Guitars on social media. Follow them on social media. A lot of times they'll post new things that come in, and it's sold before it even makes the website. Things will sell like that. It's lickety split. Every day's a buying day over there. My boy Bobby, he'll take good care of you. Give him a call, 509-818-7693. Every day's a buying day, right? And every day you like money more than you like to have stuff that's sitting around not doing nothing. Or send him an email, sales.rivercityguitars@gmail.com. Include a picture. Tell them Squire sent you. Love those guys. They'll treat you really well. Thank you, River City Guitars, for your support. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. It's been a good year for the podcast. Bad year, overall for humanity. Hang in there. How bad can it get? I've been saying don't ask. But don't forget the golden rule. No matter how bad things feel, it can get worse. So don't forget the golden rule. Treat people the way you want to be treated. It's really easy. And just generally speaking, don't be a dick. I can hear you great, man.
That's fantastic.
Look at tonight, man? I'm always like, every time the video pops up and I see someone, I'm always just super impressed by everyone else's setup. And then I look around and I'm like, well, in the video, mine looks pretty cool because it's just like a wall. But like over here is like a dog bed and
yeah, man. I got like cardboard boxes all over the place.
Yeah, is that right?
A lot of cool amps though, yeah.
Hey, thanks for taking time to come talk to me.
No, man, I was really excited.
I'm going to ask you so many stupid questions, and people who are fans of you are going to be so fucking pissed at me.
Oh.
Because I don't know very much about amps. I've been playing guitar forever, I know what I like about guitars, and I probably know what I like about amps, but I don't know that much about the technical stuff. And I don't want to drill you about the technical stuff, but I kind of want to drill you about the technical stuff.
Man, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
The knowledge.
So you've been doing this for a minute.
Yeah, man. I've been professionally building gear for about 12 years.
Yeah.
And I started back in 2009. Just did some restoration work, and I was restoring like old Marshall cabs and Fender cabs. And started like doing just kind of some ads online. And we were living close to Boston, and people like wanted recovers, So I started kind of changing the colors of people's cabinets and doing the restoration work for old vintage amps. And it just kind of caught on. And, that was a long time ago, kind of, evolved over the years. We moved out of the city, after a couple of years, and I got a workshop and started building cabinets. And the cabinet stuff, it really took off. I had a lot of guys that were doing like hobby amp building.
Yeah.
And nobody was building cabinets for the most part. So I started doing just some small cabinets for these guys that were building train wreck clones. and they were just little boxes, right, covered in Tolex, and I was making them, kind of pretty decorative and stuff, and I was putting racing stripes on them, and adding in some suede and some different Tolex textures and stuff like that, and they started selling online in like minutes, and I couldn't believe it, and I was like, wow, man, like this is great, like maybe I found something that I can kind of add to this guitar community online. So I started doing the cabinet stuff, and that just kind of evolved and ended up doing amps a couple years later. And then the amp stuff, kind of took off as well. And I've just been building the brand now for quite some time. So now I got a whole lineup of amps and, some cool people playing them and a business going.
How intimidating was it to go from recovering the cabinets to then you're like, well, I've seen these things, I know what they look like on the inside and the outside, and there's not that, it's not rocket science.
Yeah.
But actually wiring up amplifiers, that's a jump ahead.
Yeah, man. It was kind of cool as I had kind of all this experience doing these recovers, and I had a lot of guys, bringing the amps to me and just dropping the amp off fully. Like, so I'd have, the whole thing dropped off, and it got me all this experience being able to see kind of how they were put together, how people wired stuff up. And I had, I'd done some wiring in the past, like when I was a kid, like, back in the 90s, we would like, put a car stereo in your car, right?
Sure.
And, it was even like, I remember Crutchfield, you could go and you could like buy like a harness, right? And anybody could install one of those. But before that, like you had to like figure it out, and I remember we would like take apart like our parents' Toyota Tercel and like, what I mean? Try to hook up a stereo and you turn it on and like the wipers would go up and down.
I man, the stereo in every one of my cars growing up, and that was in the 80s. Like there was, no, there was a couple of uncles with wire strippers. They're like, here, use these.
Yeah,
go for it.
Like, just use like electrical tape to make the connections, and just kind of hope that it would work.
Yeah, and it usually would.
So I had a little bit of experience kind of wiring stuff up from that, and we'd put like big speakers in the back of the car too. And so I had a little experience making speakers too. But dude, I from getting that experience, those guys dropping the amps off of my house, I was able to kind of see how the stuff went together, and I could see, the construction techniques and the materials that were used, and where people were putting the wires. And that was anything from like an old Marshall from the 70s to like a brand new Two-Rock. I was able to kind of just see all that stuff. So when I finally made the jump to building amps, I mean, obviously there was a pretty big learning curve. Like I had to learn how to really solder and kind of, figure out connections and all that kind of stuff. But man, dude, I just jumped right into it, and first amp I built was a Trainwreck Rocket. And I got a bunch of information from a website. It was the Amp Garage, which is still active, but I don't think they have as much traffic as they used to. And dude, I don't know. It's like a lot of it's just kind of just like paint by numbers. Like when you're first starting out, you know what I mean? It's like putting a model together. Not that hard.
What is the Rocket modeled after? Is it? I mean, most amps. Here's the first of my naive shit. Most amps are based on the Fender circuit, right? Which is one of the first amps.
Yeah,
including the Marshall, right?
Well, yeah. So there's like the Fender Bassman. From 59, and that's kind of where the Plexi evolved from, and a lot of the Dumbles and Dumble clones that I build are kind of in that same vein too. The Trainwreck stuff was a little different. There was a guy in Jersey, his name was Ken Fisher, and he made Trainwrecks. I think that was back in the late 80s, 90s. And he made like 3 or 4 different models, and one of them was the Rocket. It had 4 EL84 tubes. It was I think it was kind of more like the AC30 kind of Vox vibe. But they sounded really good, man. It was like a clean amp. It was, pretty aggressive. A lot of country players play that stuff right now. But the Trainwreck stuff, he had the Rocket, which was pretty clean. He had the Liverpool, which was also an EL84 amp, 30 watts. That was a little more aggressive, had some good gain on it. Also, it was a single channel. And then they had the amp, the Trainwreck Express, which was just like this crazy gain monster, super loud. really, really sensitive. And, you know, those amps are cool. They're all single channel, but that Express, you know, what the coolest thing about that amp was that it did this like clean to mean thing. So it was really, really responsive to your guitar volume.
Yeah.
But you could turn down the guitar volume and not lose that much volume on the amp and get like a real nice clean. And then, you know, what a lot of guys would do is just kind of like if they had a Les Paul or something that had 2 pickups, you'd have like 1 pickup volume down, 1 pickup volume maxed, you'd flip the switch and then have this like wild, you know, gain channel on the other pickup. So the Trainwrecks were cool, but, you know, definitely like they're kind of their own thing. But very, very rare. I think there's only a couple hundred of them out there. They have those cool hardwood cabinets.
Yeah.
Have you seen those things? They got the cool like Trainwreck logo.
Yeah.
And Ken Fisher, you know, passed away. So there wasn't, you know, a ton of Trainwrecks made. And I think they had some reissues and stuff like that. But yeah, they're cool amps, man. And definitely like pretty elusive. And that's kind of what ended up steering me over to this, you know, Dumble vibe thing that I do now. You know, those also being very rare amps, it's like Dumbles and Trainwrecks, you know, kind of went together, being this like ultra boutique sort of guitar
Top
amp
of the mountain.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Super rare. You know, one guy built all this stuff. There wasn't like a big company.
Not to mention,
you know?
I don't know what the Dumble guy's name is. What is his name?
Howard Dumble.
Howard Dumble. There are legendary, like pretty funny stories about that guy.
Yeah, he's a pretty eccentric character.
He sounds like
from
a
my understanding.
character. I've heard stories about him delivering amps on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
To someone at their gig, just like no case or anything, just like bungeed to his back seat, you know, just like, here you go. Here's the amp you ordered 5 years ago.
Yeah, very strange dude. You know, I think he was out in like Santa Cruz, maybe California.
Yeah, I heard some stories from Santa Cruz music store people.
Yeah, my buddy Henry Kaiser, he told me some just wild stories about, you know, when he first met Dumble, and it was just that, man. It was like, I remember Henry said he was playing guitar with his buddies. They were pretty young, just in like the garage somewhere in Santa Cruz, and he's like, this guy pulls up on a motorcycle with an amp in the back. And he's like, you got to try this thing. Like, and Henry said he just plugged it in. He was like, you know, this strange guy, but he had this amp that sounded, you know, magnificent. You know, just kind of driving around.
That's
I don't know kind of how that whole thing evolved, but you know, he made a name for himself back then for sure.
I've also heard that if you get in line for one of his amps, don't ask when it's going to be done.
Yeah, he had a contract that you can find online if you look hard enough, and it has all these different stipulations about the ordering process. You know, the deposits that are due. There's no timeline, I don't think. Like, you know, when the amp's going to be done, and then there's a clause in there that says like you are not allowed to contact me to ask, you know, when the amp will be finished.
I've heard that if you do, you go to the back of the line.
Yeah, I heard the same thing.
That sucks.
The strange dude, man. Yeah, I'll tell you what though, he definitely made some great sounding amplifiers, you know, and took the circus to the next level. You know, I think that he had some good ideas, and you know, definitely knew what he was doing. You know, some of the amps that I've played, like I've played a couple real ones, and dude, they sound real good. Like, you know, both sides.
You know, before the explosion of internet customer service and all of that stuff, I gotta say, like, he kind of had it right. Like, I'm gonna get your thing done. Just take it easy.
Yeah.
You got to appreciate him sticking to his guns on that.
Yeah, I mean, the best part was he was making people send in tapes of their playing to see if like they were worthy of his amps. Yeah. I mean, he was building for like Jackson Browne and Stevie Ray Vaughan,
right?
You know, all these like you know, top level guys back then.
But he would you know, he would reject you if he didn't like your playing.
Reject you. Man. He would reject you.
That is amazing.
If you were worthy or not. Yeah.
It's like
Wild dude.
it's like running artist relations, but charging, exorbitant full price.
Yeah. That's wild.
What a fucking animal.
Seriously. Can't contact me. You got to send me tapes of your plan. You can't contact me and let me know, ask when your amp's going to be done. And, but hey, man, the guys that got amps from him were, extremely happy with them.
Were they all gold mines? Or
I don't think so.
Yeah.
No. The amps are like, kind of like an instrument, you get the sum of all parts and you can put the same thing together, part for part. They sound different. And no one really knows why. I think maybe something to do with tolerance on parts and things like that. And some of those amps that he built, they were custom made for a specific player too. So like what you might hear, and want in an amp may be different than, what I hear. And so maybe that's what the differences were too. You know what I mean? So I think he had some that sounded real good, some that were probably mediocre, and some that, didn't sound great.
Right.
But, you get enough good ones and that's all you need.
Is it possible that it took him that long because he would go through, if he thought he built an amp that was a dog, he would go through and replace certain components to try and make it happen? Or he was breaking it in? Like, is that ridiculous?
Yeah, I mean,
he was just a weirdo. Like he's like smoking grass and don't interrupt my motorcycle rides.
Yeah, I mean, he was he was etching his own PCB boards also, which can take some time.
I'll say.
Yeah, I don't really know, man, but
right,
you got him done.
Yeah. Anyway, what a nut.
Dude, crazy guy. I've heard from him before. I remember when I first got started, I think I posted something on eBay that had his name on it. I was selling like a pedal or something like that. You say Dumble Style.
Yeah.
He catches on to that, man. He polices eBay. He'll find you.
Is that right?
Yeah. Get your listing pulled down. You gotta be real careful.
That's
where the whole D style thing came from, because nobody wants to say Dumble Style.
Right.
Yeah.
But
it's crazy. Like, so,
alive,
the wildest thing was there was just like so much secretism of his circuits. And, he went to great lengths to try to protect them from, guys like us, like people that want to, make that amp and get that sound that maybe, aren't worthy of it. Right. Like maybe, don't have the money, you don't have the skills, whatever it may be. So he was putting he was putting epoxy on the circuit boards, and he would fully protect the circuit, whether it was like silicone that would essentially encapsulate all the components. So you couldn't tell what the amp was or what was inside it.
Is it possible that had something to do with the actual sound?
I don't know. I mean, I would think that it could help with longevity and durability of the amp.
What would
everything kind of in this
would add to the weight?
Yeah. He even put some of the stuff was in this really, really hard epoxy, like some of the hardening stuff where you'd actually add two chemicals together and have it be so insanely, congealed, like this really, really solid block. You just can't get into that stuff. But it's that secrecy and kind of this mystique that really blew that whole thing up.
I mean, what happens when your amp needs to be recapped?
You got to take out the silicone.
You got to go in there with an X-Acto knife and carve that all out.
So most of the areas that had the epoxy were the preamp sections. So the high voltage electrolytics, like the real filter caps that generally get changed out during a cap job, those were not covered. So you could get the caps out. I mean, there's really small ones as well that
it wasn't like you took the chassis out and it was just like a Han Solo.
Yeah. No, just a very like small part, just the preamp part.
Got it.
Yeah,
That's nuts, man. But I mean,
yeah,
nothing stays secret forever.
I know. Yeah, so some guys back in probably like I don't know 2002, 2001, somewhere around that era. They got into them, and there's some crazy stories. I've heard stories about you know like someone told me a story once that Santana has a couple of them, and someone told me a story that the Santana's roadies were actually bribed, so some guys could come in at night after a Santana show, get the amp out of the concert area, go back, reverse engineer the amp, and then bring it back before the next day so they could see what's inside the amp. I don't know if it's true, but it's a wild story.
That's a good story.
Yeah,
That's the kind of story, if you're someone who figured it out somehow, you would want to have a story like that.
for sure. Right.
You know?
Yeah. So some guys got back into those amps around that time. And, then a lot of companies popped up, kind of doing the clone thing, like Fuchs and Turok and those guys, I think came about around 2002. And since then, kind of more information's come out, and now there's a lot of different builders that are kind of building in that style, myself included. But those amps are cool, man. Like I got to play a couple real ones when I was doing the recover work, and just trying to find some new customers. I was doing a lot of stuff around Boston, just trying to find, it was anything from, like I said, like hobby builders to bands. And I got contacted by this one guy, and he says, hey man, like I got a real special amp I want to get a new head shelf for. And I was like, okay, cool. And I'd heard about the Dumble thing, like I said, I built the train wreck and stuff. And he says, come over my house. And he lived over in Winchester, which is this really nice suburb of Boston. And so I show up there on like a Saturday, and he says, come inside. And he seemed like a nice guy. So I went in his house, and takes me down to his basement. And he's got like all this crazy guitar gear. And he's like, this is the amp that I wanted to show you. I want to get a head shelf. It's in a combo right now. And it was a real Dumble. It was an Overdrive special. It was serial number 84, which is a combo in buckskin suede, which is like this cool yellow color with box cloth. And he's like, this is a real Dumble. And I was like, dude, like, how do you have this? And he's like, well, I got that one and also two other ones. So he had that. And he also had this crazy dual showman that was modded. I think it was dropped down to 50 watts. Transformers were swapped, and then there was two GZ34 two rectifiers in it. That was really cool. And so I had this opportunity to play both those amps. And dude, like when I heard those amps, I was like, it like transformed the whole like electric guitar thing for me. And I had played guitar for a long time at that point. Like that was, I'd probably played guitar for, I don't know, 20 years when I saw that Dumble. And I was like, oh my God, like, this is crazy. Because what it was like, it wasn't just an amp that was like kind of replicating the sound. Like it was like another instrument. Like it was almost like you were playing two instruments, you know what I mean? Right. As one, because it had this like really cool breath to it. Great cleans, big kind of Fender sound. And then the Overdrive was just like, it was almost like you were in it. Like, you could feel the amp in your fingers, and there was just all this like touch sensitivity and cool stuff happening. And I was like, it was just like a moment, where you're like, wow, like there's more to this.
Right.
More to the guitar.
Let me ask you a couple questions real quick before we get, I want to hear some more about this guy's amp collection. What was your very first tube amplifier? And did you play in bands?
Yeah. I played in some bands. I grew up in New Hampshire in kind of a smaller town, so we had some stuff going on there. And in college,
Jam
I
bands?
had a band. And what's that?
Jam band?
Yeah, a little bit jam bands.
Yeah,
play like some Tom Petty and Allman Brothers, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But dude, I remember like I had this crazy little crate amp, that had digital effects built into it. That was not my first tube amp, but that was my first amp.
Yeah.
I think I ended up with like a Fender, like one of those Hot Rod Deluxes, those big 4x10 things that were like impossible to balance the volume out of. They like barely like nudge the volume control and try to have enough
Why is
blast.
that?
I don't know. I think they do it so it sounds louder at Guitar Center, so more people think it has like more volume. But
That's
I don't know.
that's pretty clever. I mean, that's dirty dealing, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know why else you can definitely manipulate those things. Yeah, man. So I had like a Fender Hot Rod Deluxe, and some other kind of little tube amps. I remember my buddy was out in Arizona, one of my best friends from high school. He was going around and trying to find all these old organ amps, and guys just kind of like, a lot of people try to get rid of the organs. Like they have organs in the house, they don't know what to do with it, and there's like tube amps inside, those old Hammond organs and stuff like that. So you can grab those things and kind of either rebuild it into a guitar amp or something that's more voiced for guitar, or some people just grab the tubes out of it too. There's always like some old like cool glass in there. So he had built me a couple amps too, but it was kind of before we had figured out the whole tube amp thing. And I remember, dude, he gave me this one amp. It was this cool Masco. It was a harp. It was originally like a PA amp that I think they used in like the Army for like mess halls and stuff.
Yeah.
And they would use it for announcements. And it was running at like 64 ohms or something like that. So we could run like a super, super, super long string of speakers. So you basically would like rewire it, and you can kind of manipulate these things, and you could take an old Masco like that was meant to do a PA, and you could turn it into like a killer harp amp or a killer guitar amp. And he had made this thing for me, and I had it, and it would shock the shit out of me, like all the time. Like it wasn't grounded right. So like you'd be playing it and like things would be cool, and you'd be like, oh man, like I like the sound. You go to like turn it up a little bit, this nasty shock. So I had a couple of those too that were cool at the time for sure.
Do you shock yourself much when you're building?
Not very often these days, but it does happen for sure. Right. Like when you least expect it.
So you're never not surprised.
I'm always surprised.
Yeah.
If I shock myself. Yeah. It's never good. It's never a good feeling, Right. But when I moved into this shop now, I got like all the GFCI outlets, so it's pretty well protected. Like even if there's like a slight shock or something, the circle trip, or there's been the occasion where you get a couple 100 volts of DC like across your hand or whatever. But I don't know, cost of doing business, I guess. You know what I'm saying?
I guess so. All right. So you meet this guy and you play this Dumble. You build a box for his combo to make it a head?
Yeah, I built a head shell for him that matched up, and we got it mounted up, and I got to go over there a couple more times and play those amps, man. And like I said, like it kind of got me into that whole thing with those like ultra boutique amps, man. It was like I had to know what was inside them.
When you started building amps, did you hit him up to see if you could A/B?
Yeah, I actually got to do that a couple times.
Oh, that's sweet. That's a good customer.
Yeah, so he ended up being a really great guy. We struck up a friendship and kept in contact for a couple years, and he kind of helped me with the whole kind of not starting the business, but helping me with the different models, because he had a really good ear. And he was this guy. He ended up being he worked for a power plant company, and he was like an electrical engineer, and so he also built amps. So he kind of helped me out, just kind of figuring the whole thing out when I first started. So it was a good contact to have. So yeah, man, I get to play those amps, and that really kind of really sparked my interest. And because I was doing that whole train wreck thing, and starting to kind of get into the Dumble stuff, I met a whole bunch of people back then, like all these builders that had a lot of knowledge that needed cabinets, and they needed cabinet work, and they needed head cabinets. And none of these guys were running big companies. They were all kind of hobby builders that were doing a couple amps a month here or there, but they had all this knowledge, and they shared a lot of it with me.
That's amazing.
And yeah, it was cool. So I learned a lot from those guys, and just kind of again, like with the experience. But what ended up happening is, because I was doing cabinet work, I got really, really good at it. And I was just doing a lot of head shells and speaker cabinets and stuff like that. People found out about it. So then people started actually sending me their Dumbles. So I got a couple of them in the mail, and I got to kind of have those at the shop for a while. And again, just kind of like learn how they're supposed to sound, and feel the amp and like hear the timbre to it and stuff like that.
What mail service do people trust their Dumble with?
UPS next day air, man.
Because I worked for UPS for a minute.
Yeah.
And it's pretty rough business, though it wasn't the next day thing. I bet they probably pamper a lot of those things.
Yeah.
They better.
I can't remember. I can't remember the tricks, but there was a couple tricks that we used where it was like sending them next day air, and you put a high enough value on the package, it goes on like a different conveyor belt, so it doesn't get
first class
quite as
ticket.
abused. Yeah, but we would spend like you spend a couple $100 getting them. I had a couple next day aired from California.
Yeah,
it was expensive, but it's worth it, man. It really takes the risk out of it. But
right.
I always did think it was a little crazy, but it was good for me.
So after you build this, you're doing the train wreck thing, and so did you just sort of say, all right, I built my first amp, here it is? Do you still have that amp?
I do.
Awesome.
I do still have it. Yeah. Yeah. So I had that.
Have you kept the first one of every one that you built?
Almost.
Yeah.
There's a couple that slipped away, but I've got all the prototypes. I have all the prototypes. Some of the first factory models kind of got away from me. Either I lent it out to someone for a demo and they ended up wanting to buy it. But I do have all the prototypes and some of the first edition amps.
Yeah.
Which is cool. So yeah, so I after that whole train wreck thing, I got into the Dumble stuff. When I started building amps, and again, I had a lot of cool stuff, some Blutotones, some Two Rocks, some of these really high-end Dumble clones coming my way in the shop, either for new cabinets or for some repair work. So again, I got to see how those were put together, and ended up making kind of my own thing.
What is the difference? I mean, without without giving TED Talks, what is the difference between a killer Marshall and a Dumble style amp?
A lot of it's in the gain structure.
Yeah.
And some of it is in the EQ. So if you look at the Marshall or Dumble amp, they're similar, and they both have cascading preamps where you've got clean channel that's always on, and then a overdrive channel that kind of stacked on top. But there's different ways to bias each individual preamp tube that kind of allows for a different gain structure. So you may have more gain in the upper mids, or maybe more low end, or more high end, maybe a more scooped sound. So you can do that with different values in the preamp, and then a different tone stack. So a lot of the amps are similar. I mean, they're vacuum tube amps. There's only a certain amount of things you can do with them, but it's one of those things where it's like the sum of all parts kind of creates a bigger picture.
And so how many models do you build now?
So I have 6 models right now. I have a couple single channel clean amps that are really cool. I have one that's it's called the Dirty Wonderland.
For 1 second.
Yeah.
Is the purpose of having more than one single channel clean amp one just power, like wattage, you have a 100 watt and a 50 watt, and are they voiced so differently? This is another line of naive questions with Mike.
Yeah, so it's it's a good way to explain it. So I do the 2 different amps in all different power levels. So you can get a 22 or a 50 watt or a 100 watt amp. with a single channel clean amp, generally you're going to have a sound that's kind of like a Fender Bassman or like a vintage twin. And that's kind of what my Dirty Wonderland amp is. It's like this kind of straight up vintage Fender Blackface clean. But then there's another amp that I have. It's the Steel String Singer. And it's like one of the amps that Stevie Ray Vaughan used to play. John Mayer plays one now. And if you listen to, Stevie's playing, you hear like that really, really kind of high output clean, right? Where it's very percussive, it's biting, it cuts through the mix. You get like these, almost overdriven attributes to the sound, or you get like cool, like clean sustain. You get more of a lead tone, and that's what my Steel String Singer does. So it's got an extra tube that's called a cathode follower, and that cathode follower is a very high output but low gain stage. That really kind of, it's almost like remember those old Saabs that had like the turbos in them?
Sure.
And like you hear them spin, and then the car would take off. That's what the cathode follower kind of does. It almost like takes the amp and like spins it up real fast, and then it takes off, but doesn't add any distortion. So you get like this super high output clean tone that doesn't have any gain.
Can I ask another naive question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if I don't ask you now, I'll forget. So when people talk about a note bloom,
mm-hmm.
and an amp is touch sensitive, is that what's happening inside of an amp when a note blossoms? Like the Saab turbo thing?
I think that the note bloom is more of a kind of guitar amp relationship thing. So, like if you got that spot in the room, it's like when you get the feedback spot where you hear the feedback, and if you move a little bit, the feedback goes away, or the hum, if you're playing single coils. Note bloom is the same kind of thing. So like if you could be sitting right here and get no note bloom at all, and you move this way, and all of a sudden your guitar's blooming all over the place. So I think that there is some sort of like pickup amp thing, The thing I'm talking about is like just like high output clean tones, percussive cleans, clean lead, I like to call it, So that's what my two clean amps do. You got the one kind of vintage sounding, and you got the one kind of Stevie Ray Vaughan sounding.
People love that shit.
People love it.
Turns out
clean amps are cool, man.
Stevie Ray Vaughan.
People, it's crazy. It's like clean amps. People love clean amps. It's like this new thing over the past few years. A great clean sounds boring with the wrong amp,
Right.
It was like, especially when you're playing like those amps we grew up with, right? Where you have like a Hot Rod Deluxe, and it's just like, oh, where's my overdrive? I need a pedal or whatever. But when you get one of these high-end amps, man, that's really focused on that clean tone, there's like more musicality to it, and you can connect with it in a different way.
Also, we live in the golden age of everything, right? But the golden age of pedals. And so people are just as pleased as pigs in shit to get a very high quality, I hate the term pedal platform because it's so used, but I mean, there it is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The argument
the pedal platform is killer.
Of would you rather have a killer guitar or a killer amp? I think I already know your answer.
Yeah, the killer. I like both, but
you know what?
I'd rather have a nicer amp and a mediocre guitar than a nice guitar and a mediocre amp.
Right.
For sure. I mean, the sound reproduction is a lot to it, I think that I used to say that the amp was an extension of the instrument, but these days, like, I think the amp is an instrument of its own. When you get a good solid hand wired amp that was voiced properly, it's no different than getting a great guitar.
I would agree.
Absolutely.
What about, let's talk about your dirty amps.
Yeah. So I got a couple of those. One of the kind of main Dumble amps that he became so famous for was the Overdrive Special,
Mhm.
which I said before is that kind of cascading clean and dirty, channels packed into one amp. So I have amps that are kind of in that vein. I have one, it's called the Bombshell Overdrive, and that's a straight up Dumble clone where it's got a clean channel, an overdrive channel, and that's it. Three preamp tubes, comes in 22, 50, or 100 watts. Really, really strong output. That has a ton of touch sensitivity, great cleans, awesome overdrive. And then I took that platform and took it a little bit further. So I took that same kind of idea with the Overdrive Special, and I made the Wonderland Overdrive, which has a little bit of a different preamp, which kind of does the John Mayer sort of thing a little bit better. And I added reverb onto that one, so it's got a couple other features and also half power. So that amp's pretty cool. And then I have another amp called the Ampliphonics and Gain, which is this really wild 2-channel amp with independent preamps. So it's got a dedicated tone stack for clean. It's not cascading. And it has a dedicated tone stack for overdrive. And that amp's crazy, man. It's got this super, super high gain Marshall Plexi JCM 800 channel, and then a dedicated Fender Bassman clean channel. And that amp's really cool too. So those are my three kind of dirty amps. And then I got this amp behind me, which you can kind of see. This one is a new amp that I came out with last fall. And that's the Overdrive Reverb. And that's kind of a similar amp, but it has a really crazy reverb section in it where it's like awesome 3-dimensional, still has really strong kind of output to it, but the reverb is huge. And it's got this really, really cool vibe going on. So that's kind of my higher end amp right now. So I got a full line. We've had a lot of success with that amp and the Wonderland Overdrive being really great models, man. I've done a lot to kind of keep the quality as high as possible. I'm big on making sure the noise floor of the amps is really low. So like I hate like buzz and hum and all that kind of stuff. I like really quiet amps, that are again like that extension of the guitar, that it's its own instrument. It kind of does its own thing, and it's put together really well. I had a couple guys kind of early on when I was doing this, take the amps on the road, and we had them break. I used to have some issues in shipping and stuff like that, so I learned from those mistakes. Where now I've got these amps that are rock solid, put together really well, and I kind of go through a lot of different I don't know, more modern kind of construction techniques where I'm getting, hardware embedded into the chassis at the metal factory, stuff
Right.
that can never come loose, things like that. So, yeah, man, it's been really good.
Amazing. Your high gain amp is called the Ampliphonics, is that right?
Yeah, Ampliphonics and Gain.
I watched RJ's, that's his name, right? RJ? I
Yeah,
watched that demo. He's a ripper. Of course. I mean, I
he's an
think that he
awesome
can.
player.
Oh yeah, he's a fucking maniac. But that amp sounds killer.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, nicely done. Um, and you have a pedal as well?
Yeah, I've got it's called the Big Bloom Overdrive,
Uh-huh.
and it's a high gain overdrive pedal, preamp. And it's pretty cool. It's got a real throaty tone to it. A lot of sold a lot of those over the years. They're really cool, man. I don't know if I have any handy here, but yeah, they're sharp looking pedals too.
And what is that? It is like it's an overdrive gain, like a gain boost.
Yeah, it's almost like a preamp
Uh-huh.
where you can really push your amp real hard. So it
Is
does the Dumble overdrive thing. It's pretty throaty. It's got more gain than a kind of overdrive special, with a little bit of boost in the upper mids, like upper low mids. They're cool, man. They sound awesome.
is it modeled after any one component from any one preamp from one of your amps in your line?
No, no,
It's its
it's
own
not.
thing.
It's a transistor based pedal. It sounds again, it kind of does what I tried to get out of that pedal was really like when you talk about Dumble amps, there's specific kind of characteristics that a lot of them have. We were talking about note bloom. Note bloom is one of those things. Controlled feedback is one of those things. And, you know, kind of that second order harmonic thing too, where you kind of hear the like overtones and stuff. So that pedal kind of does those things. Like if you have, it's almost like a novelty where if you want to like get the dumble tone, you turn on a big bloom. You know, where the amps and stuff are, you know, kind of you get more of what you put into it. You know, that thing you turn that on and you're like, oh yeah, this amp's crazy. Like it's doing all this feedback and stuff like that. So
Right.
it does its own thing. It's cool.
Do you have ambitions to expand even more or go into other things like build
Yeah.
guitars?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that because I have I noticed like Friedman just started doing a guitar
Yeah.
line, and I was like, man, that would be really cool. Um, you know, I definitely
I'm
am growing
surprised
the
that guy's not
business,
building fucking drums.
dude. You got everything.
Yeah.
You got everything. I know. Yeah, so I'm trying to expand the business now. You know, we've been growing pretty good over the past few years, and I'm looking to kind of get some more people on staff. You know, meet some more artists, and yeah, man, I'm looking into maybe doing some more high gain stuff next year. That Ampliphonics is does the Marshall thing,
Yeah.
and I started playing around with that voicing recently, and there's a lot of guys that are doing like crazy high gain Marshall mods.
Yeah.
That's been a thing for a while, but I don't know a lot about it. And
That's
I
been the
started looking
launching
at
point
that.
of all of the big modern amp
Yeah,
builders, right? The like
yeah,
hard rock guy, high gain guys.
yeah. So there's again like a whole secretive world behind those mods too, you know. And so I'm starting to kind of look at some of those, and I was playing with them a couple weeks ago with that Ampliphonics. Dude, it's wild, man. Like how many different tones you can get out of just like a standard Marshall circuit. So I might go kind of into the high gain thing later this year, if I can find some ways to kind of be different, you know, within that stuff. But there's a lot of guys, you know, I've been doing the Dumble thing for a while, and it's really interesting, and I love like kind of all the drama and the mystique that kind of comes along with it, you know. It's crazy. I mean, you should see some of the stuff online, like these guys, you know, the arguments and the, you know, just petty stuff all revolving around just the Dumble thing. I don't know why it's like that. It has to be just because like he was such a crazy dude. But
Did he
um
pass away?
no, he's still alive.
That's what I
Still
thought.
alive.
Do you
Yeah.
think that he gets a lot of pleasure out of all of the drama that people make such a fuss about him?
I don't know.
I
I
bet
have a
he's
feeling
entertained.
I don't think he does. I don't think he does. I mean, when I heard from him about the eBay thing, that was probably like 5 or 6 years ago. We had a little exchange, and he was actually pretty nice on email, you know. But I don't think that he finds it very amusing,
No.
you know. I really don't. So
Right.
yeah, man, the Marshall thing is kind of similar. Like there's not quite as much drama, but it seems like there's just as much secretism and some cool stuff that's happening. So I thought about maybe expanding into that. But dude, yeah, guitars would be cool. Maybe someday, you know, it's a
It's crazy. I
different
mean,
world.
I'm gonna try. I'm sure that I'll miss some, but like Bogner, right? Soldano, Friedman. These are all guys who got started doing mods, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Hmm.
What are the differences? Because I don't fucking know.
Yeah. I mean, I've just been kind of diving into it a little bit, but you know, one that comes to mind is there's the Jose mod,
Right?
which is kind of has these different ways. I think Mark Cameron did a lot of different mods also. And I think some of those are pretty secretive. So I'm not really sure, but a lot of them are real high gain. And if you get some of that information, which I've started collecting, I mean, there's some wild stuff those guys did. I mean, like tacking transistors onto tubes inside the amp and making them switchable, like crazy stuff. Like I didn't even think that you could go that crazy. And you get these wicked saturated amps, super heavy sounds, and people love it.
Right. But yeah, people do love it. It's crazy. Do you think that it's insane that your business is doing as well as it is, considering that we live in a time when just about everyone owns an amp modeler also.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I know it's two completely different things, but a lot of kids will never know the difference.
Yeah. The amp modeling thing is I think a whole different thing. I mean, the guys that I know that use amp modelers and like them are usually the guys that are playing big stages,
Right.
you know, with real big bands. And a lot of times, like, they're playing parts of music. You know what I mean? They're not out there jamming and like feeling what's going on stage and improvising. They're playing a song that was recorded. You know what I mean? They need to sound like that song.
Right.
And I think it's a lot easier to dial in with some of those modeling amps. And I think there's also, you know, if you're touring the country, it's a lot easier to have a amp modeler than a vintage tube amp or something that, you know, is going to get banged around in the back of a bus. So I do think the modelers have their space, and I think some of those profiling amps are pretty cool. You know, where you can.
Do you own a modeler?
I don't. No.
You don't.
No way.
That'd be pretty.
And
cool.
if I did, I wouldn't tell you. But yeah, some of that stuff is cool. I thought about maybe getting some of my amps profiled and then kind of being able to play in that space. So if you wanted to get a pack of, you wanted to get Amplified Nation amp and you were kind of more of a modeler guy, maybe you get a plug-in.
Right. Why not?
You know, but there's all that crazy stuff. What's that company? Universal Audio, I think.
Universal Audio is great. Yeah.
Yeah, man. They make tons of stuff, right?
I know people over there if you want to intro.
Nice. Yeah, so I was thinking something like that. But I've heard that, you know, people get pretty good results, but I don't think you get that same touch sensitivity. You're not going to get the connection. You know, you're not going to, your guitar is not going to respond. It's a computer. You know, it's not going to respond to a tube amp that's breathing and, you know, analog and real kind of like AC current flowing through it, you know, that you're actually creating. So I think it's different. So I think if you want to really have an organic sound and you want to hear, you know, more of, you know, your fingers and you want to really hear your guitar, you got to have a tube amp. And
that's fine.
I don't think they're going to, I mean, I don't know, like film cameras aren't here anymore, but you know, I do think that the tube amps will always have a place because if they're truly an instrument,
cameras, you know, they really do. Some photographers still use film.
Yeah, there's got to be a reason, right?
Right. How much do you still play? I mean, do you, other than I'm sure before you ship an amp out, you turn it on and make sure sound comes out?
Yeah. I don't play as much as I used to, you know. I probably play every day. I play, you know, obviously I'm testing stuff, but I've been trying to play a little of acoustic and stuff like that. I feel like a lot of times when I'm playing guitar, it's like so related to work. You know what I mean? If you're building amps all day long at night, you're gonna play an amp. Like you want to relax, you know what I mean? Maybe play an acoustic. So I've been doing that a little bit. But I still play considerably. I mean, it's been my passion my whole life. Like it's kind of like my thing, you know what I mean? And now it's my profession also. So, you know, it's funny because I'll sit here and build amps all day long and then, you know, get home at night and just look at guitars on the internet. You know, like I'm still, it's like I can't shake the whole thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wish I could play more, but you know, I'm a busy guy, man. I got 2 kids and got a business and all that kind of stuff. So we're still getting down to the guitar when we can. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I feel like my Instagram feed is just for me to look at guitars, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
I refuse to like follow anyone personal. It's all guitar related stuff.
Do you think that
guitars can't stress you out, you know?
No. Also, when you go home and play an acoustic guitar, guaranteed it won't shock you.
No, it will not shock.
I mean, unless I guess unless it's plugged into a little Fishman or something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. But when I was in college, that was kind of when like the whole like Dave Matthews thing was exploding.
Yeah.
You know, back in the, you know, around 2000, maybe a little before. So I kind of got into that big time. You know, so when I was really playing out and playing with people and doing the kind of band stuff, like I used to play acoustic. I used to play a lot of acoustic electric. I had these really cool, like I had this old Martin D35, 1973 D35. It was like the coolest guitar. It was built like it was just a cannon. Like it was built so well, like didn't even need to be humidified. It was such a great guitar. So I used to play only acoustic back then. And, you know, it was funny because I had always had electric guitars, but for that period of time when I was really, really active playing, you know, most of my live performances and stuff like that were on acoustic and singing and stuff like that. And then, you know, I kind of gravitated back to the electric thing. And now I mostly play electric, you know, doing the business and stuff like that. But I love that acoustic tones, man. I love those old songs, you know, and I kind of love that, you know, again, like that connection, you know, really just playing the instrument, just having that, you know, one thing going on instead of the amp and all this other stuff.
There's a connection, I think, between being passionate about playing acoustic, because that's such a responsive instrument to play, right?
Yeah.
And playing a very expressive amp.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, for sure. You get that organic connection, you know, and you kind of can hear everything that's going on. I think you can get more intimate with an acoustic guitar.
Sure.
Know? You can play real soft, and you really control the volume, you know, especially with your finger picking and stuff like that. So I think you have more control over that experience where, you know, when you're playing an amp and you got something cranked up, like it's just a different vibe. And it's not that one is better than the other, you know, they're just different.
Do you think you'll ever build a bass amp?
I don't know. My Dirty Wonderland amp has been used in a studio for a while for bass. You know, it's got if you get 100 watts, it can produce some pretty cool bass sounds. But yeah, I don't know. I've never really understood the bass that much. It's never really been, you know, I've had a couple basses, but it's never really been my thing. So I probably just stick to guitar stuff.
Right. What about expanding the pedal line? Is that something that you feel like?
Yeah. So there was this, I have the Big Bloom, right? And when I first started building those, it's probably 2014, I ended up doing a double bloom, which had two pedals built into one. And you could have it so it would switch. So you have like, there was two toggle switches. So I built them two different ways. So you could either turn on each pedal with a toggle. So you have like a toggle A and toggle B, and each one would be connected to a pedal. So you could stack them. So you get like monstrous amounts of gain. And then I had them so you could switch. So you'd like turn the pedal on and the other button would toggle between the two channels. And it was cool. They were like these really big pedals in the larger size boxes. And I built probably like 10 or 12 of them. And that was it. And I'm seeing them now on Reverb, you know, selling for like $2,000. So
what?
I know. It's crazy.
Really?
So I may start building those again.
That's a good.
You know?
I'm going to start building them.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So I was at my powder coat place today. We're trying to pick out some colors, maybe do a run of those.
Nice.
You know, yeah, we'll see.
Do you remember what you sold those for originally?
They were like $500.
Yeah. That's I mean, that's a nice turn of profit for whoever ended up with them.
I know. It's like the new Klon.
Right.
You know, the Amplified Nation double bloom. We'll see what happens.
Have you ever gotten into those things? What the
Klons?
What the hell is it?
It's yeah, they are pretty cool. The guy that made those was from Boston too, which is close by. Right. But yeah, I mean, I've played a couple of those.
And they're cool. He started building them again, right?
I don't know. There's been a whole bunch of stuff online. Like
right.
A lot of the influencer guys have been doing Klon videos recently. They're cool. You know, the way that I understood it is you would like almost want to set it so you couldn't really hear. Like you want it to be kind of transparent. So you'd have it almost like an always on pedal,
right?
That didn't really color and boost the amp that much. I think that was the way it was intended. You can crank it up and get, you know, some overdrive, but if you set it like that, it almost adds like just a little bit of sparkle, and it could be pretty cool. I mean, I don't know. It's not really. I don't know if I pay $5,000 for a.
But I mean, if you just had a killer amp, you wouldn't need one, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it just adds something like just a 3D texture.
Yeah.
Yeah, they look pretty cool.
It's very crazy. And it's also crazy to me what catches on and what doesn't catch on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, man. It's wild. It's wild.
And
then what's even crazier is when something doesn't catch on at first and then catches on later.
Right.
You know, but that's been happening forever. Like, you know, even with like the Les Pauls back in the day.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Nobody gave it. They stopped making them.
Yeah.
They were like, these old things. Look at this other thing.
And then never made them like that again.
No, that's a fact. I mean,
it is crazy.
They still are saying that they are.
Yeah, right. I know. I got some pretty good. I got a couple reissues that are pretty good guitars.
Yeah, like you have a R9.
Yeah, I get this one. This is the R8 up here. It's cool. It's aged. It's got the Mark Knopfler aging on it. That's like, you know, they do like the signature models.
Yeah.
Like,
you know who's got a signature model of a 59?
Who's that?
Keith Nelson, who introduced it.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. That's right. He's a great guy.
Really good dude. Good friend.
Yeah.
Sweet man.
Yeah, he's got it's like one of the, I think it's a made to measure. Like it's one of the really high end custom shop models. Yeah, they clone one of his guitars. He was telling me about it.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
He's a tone dork of the highest order.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
He just did an episode I saw with Gibson, kind of showing his collection. It was outstanding, man. He had such cool guitars, you know, especially some Les Paul Juniors.
Oh yeah,
that were just out of control. But yeah, he
let me play his last 59. He let me play his 59 Burst on stage. That's the only one I've ever played, and it was great. I mean, I was playing.
He used to tour with that guitar too.
I played it while he was on tour on stage. Like he handed it to me on stage. I was like, "You're crazy!" Like, I guess he knows I don't drink, so there's very little worry that I'm going to drop it.
Yeah, man, those are cool. I've run into a few of those kind of out just meeting customers. I went to this guy's house in Stamford, Connecticut. We dropped off a couple amps down there, and I remember he was a pretty famous burst collector. He had like 5 or 6 of them. I couldn't believe it.
He had 5 or 6 bursts?
He did. He had 2 59s and I think a 57 and a couple of 58s. He had Gary Moore's 58, like the real one with he's got like a little almost like a sweat stain or something on the pickguard. I got to hold it. I got pictures of me with the guitar. It was really cool. But those guitars, man, they are cool. I don't know what it is about those old Gibsons.
Well, they got big, sick, fat ass necks.
Yeah.
You know.
And those PAF pickups.
And they're old. They're old and.
I mean, dude, at this point, like, they're real old. They're like 60 years old.
They're 70 years old, aren't they?
Yeah.
I guess 60 years old, 59 is 62. Yeah, sometimes you pick up a brand new guitar though, and it's great. It's killer.
Yeah.
How do amplifiers react over through age? Because if you don't fire an amp up, like if you don't turn an amp on for a long time, it can be dangerous, right? Like if grandpa passes away and you go up into his attic and you find his old Fender amp, you don't want to just plug it into the wall and turn it on. You could fry some stuff, right? That's why people have
Variac.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, if you have an amp and it sits for a long period of time, I think especially the old amps with like those paper capacitors, I
Right.
think they dry out. You know, some of those had paper in oil,
Right.
and I think they dry out. And then if you fire it up and you just like throw 120 volts at it, those old capacitors can explode. So what you're supposed to do if you have one of those old vintage amps is you get a variac, which I use even when I turn on new amps, and it allows you to control the voltage from the wall. So you can, start with 20 volts or something. I usually start with like 70 or 80 volts, and you can just go up real slow.
Yeah.
And you do the same thing with an old vintage amp, just kind of going up 10 volts at a time until you get up to 120.
And
I
it's
do it with my
stable then.
Yeah, I do it with like new builds too, just in case you make a mistake or you put like a diode in the wrong direction or whatever. So you bring it up slowly, but I do think there's something to be said about kind of the age on components in a positive way. Also, when you have some of these vintage amps, there's two different things. So you've got, maybe an amp that has older components that were, made at a different time, maybe with higher quality. If you look at some of the old resistors, like I've got a handful of NOS parts here. And if you look at like some of the old resistors, like from Mepco or from Pyre, from back in the 60s, like those leads are 5 times thicker than any of the stuff you can get today. And some of them are, made from different materials, and they sound awesome, but you can't get them anymore. So there's those vintage components, that kind of add to it. But I do think also just having like electricity flowing through your components can age the amp in a good way, just like it does with a guitar that's been played. I'll have amps here before I send anything out. I always run the amps for 40 hours, kind of on and off. Like I'll have an amp like on, try to do like 4 hours on, 4 hours off to let it cool down for a little bit. The reason why I do it is because I want to make sure that the components are gonna last and the amp's not gonna malfunction once it get delivered.
Sure.
But I hear the amps get better. The amps get better as they have that age. And I think if you have an amp, a newer amp, dude, you could let that thing run and you can do that for like 30 days. And I think at the end of 30 days, your amp will sound better than it did when you got it.
Right.
I can hear a difference even just with the 40 hours. But I have a couple amps here that may be like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old that sound, way better than any of the new stuff that I'm putting out, just because of the longevity on the components. So, a lot of guys, when you get one of these amps, man, you get the right amp, you hold on to it, and it just gets better with age.
Let me ask you this, because my friend Jamie will probably kill me if I don't address this. How important do you think speakers are?
Very important.
He thinks it's the most important, and I pick my battles with him because he has very strong opinions and I don't
Yeah.
know anything. Uh, but he maintains that it's may perhaps the most important component in your signal chain. And
I don't know. It's definitely important. It's what you're hearing.
are
I can
people
hear a big difference between different models of speakers on the same amp.
with the advancement of technology and people moving towards, like a lot of manufacturing is more digitally focused, you do what you exist in this realm where you're creating something out of analog components. How hard is it? And I imagine, I'm guessing, but people's ability to make higher quality things seems like it would exist, but what the fuck do I know? You just said that these leads, which sound better in the old amps, you can't get anymore. How hard is it to source the things that you really want to use in builds? I imagine it's tricky.
Yeah. Some of the stuff, if you know, some of the older parts, they don't exist. You
Right.
just can't get them. As a guy that's building new models, new amps, they're are definitely some great components on the market right now.
Yeah.
But what I really find is it's more of the sum of all the parts.
Right.
So you find a good resistor that you like, you figure out, if you're using a specific type, like a carbon film resistor, you figure out where those sound good in the signal path. You figure out where they don't work in the signal path. Maybe you use something else, like a metal film resistor. You find good capacitors, whether that's a coupling capacitor, something that your tone actually passes through, or if it's an electrolytic capacitor that maybe supplies or holds power for the amp. But there's definitely enough good components. But when you add those components together and you use all the right stuff and you put it together the right way, and you really have that attention to detail, whether it's the way you lay the amp out all the way down to what wire you're using, I mean, you can get some really good results. I mean, the amps that I'm building now, they sound fantastic. They're quiet, they're reliable.
Yeah.
They've got a great timbre. They sound like a vintage amp, even though we're using newer components. And the cool thing is, the newer components, man, they do last really well. They're quiet. They've got good tolerances. So when you get a 100K resistor, it's a 100K resistor. When I have, some of my really, important clients will do some, NOS, which is like new old stock parts. And I have gotten some supplies over the years. I'm running low at this point, but there's a lot of drift on some of those components. And so you might have a 100K resistor that measures out at like 80K or 85K, or maybe it measures higher.
Right.
And that matters too, like everything matters. And that's
be
the bottom
some
line.
of that. That's like the fish sauce in your curry, right? I mean, that, right? I mean, by itself, it's a dog, it's a pig, right? It's just like, what are you doing? But
Yeah.
in the full recipe, it's amazing. That's
Yeah.
gotta be part of the magic to some of the old amps that, I just try to imagine the old Fender line as they're building these things on a production line, and they've got all these components, the tolerances are maybe all over the place, and that's why some amps were amazing and some were pigs.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure that was one of the reasons. Could be the tubes also. Some tubes sound better than others.
Do you have a favorite tube?
I have been using, yeah, you know what I do? I like some of the old Mullard and Amprex tubes. The kind of older stuff. But for new tubes, I've been using JJ's and Tube Amp Doctor more recently. They're pretty reliable, which is nice. In what I'm doing, building new amps, my most important thing, like I just really, when people get an amp, like I want it to work right. Like I want people to get what they're expecting.
Sure.
And while I love those new old stock tubes, you just never know. You know what I mean? Like you just never know. And I know if I use some of the newer stuff that has, again, like tight tolerances, with very kind of, you get a tube that comes out that only has like a 1% error rate. My customers are gonna get a good sounding amp that works well. So that kind of is what drives my decision for preamp tubes. Obviously, tone is very important, but I do want reliability, longevity, and people to get something that works.
Yeah. Of course, all those things you have to consider. To your ears, do you have a favorite tube? Like, do you prefer 84s or 6L6s, 34s?
Yeah, I'm a 6L6 guy for sure.
Yeah.
I do like EL34s also. But I think if I could only choose one, I like the 6L6. And I think the reason why is it just sounds like the artists that like I love, like the 6L6 is just kind of that classic American sound. It sounds like great blues. It sounds like great classic rock. You can get a great strat tone out of it. And when you go to the EL34s, I also love that too. Like you get that AC/DC tone, or you get the Black Sabbath tone, that Marshall stuff. But I think the 6L6, man, you get that big low end. You know, it's kind of more balanced, it's rounder. You know, that's my favorite. I can't do the EL 84s aren't my thing. I don't like the too nasally for me.
Yeah. Have a soft spot for all of them, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember the last EL34. Maybe I had a Bogner that was a
How about
EL30.
the 6V? How about 6V6? You like those?
What's
Those are
a
good.
6V6 in, like a mid power Fender?
Yeah, like a deluxe reverb or like
Oh
a
yeah, I had a
Princeton.
brown face deluxe. What's in
Yeah,
that?
6V6, I think.
That fucking amp was probably the best amp I ever owned.
Yeah,
I'm a dipshit for getting rid of it.
that's like the tweed sound. They're cool.
It was it was beautiful. It was so good. And it was not it wasn't untouched. It had been completely redone. It was in a new box. It had had a lot of work done.
Yeah,
But it was, yeah, probably the best amp I ever owned.
yeah.
6V6. Yeah, I like them. I like those. Why not?
You don't have the amp anymore?
No, man. I no, no. I should have it. I should still
Yeah,
have it.
I
I
let some
have
good gear get away over the years.
I have 3 amps. I have a little 2.8 watt satellite amplifier
Okay.
that sits right down here with me. I crank that thing through the aux when I'm
Oh,
recording.
nice. I heard good things about the aux too.
The aux is amazing. And then I have back here, I guess I have 3 amps. I have this thing. There's that little Yamaha desktop amp. It's fun. This is a PRS DG30, which is the Dave Grissom EL84 amp. It's 30 watts, but it's like rip your head off loud.
Yeah.
Um, and then I have a Blues Junior, because I thought I was going to do pedal demos for a while, and I was like, why would I do pedal demos through the DG?
Yeah.
That's not what
Use,
people own.
I heard that aux is really good for recording too.
Dude, the aux is great. There's a reason why, everyone you see doing demos in their home studio is using them now, because they sound great and you can work at any hour
Yep.
quietly.
I'll tell you, that's a space I'd love to play in.
The
Build
attenuator.
something similar to the aux. Yeah. Yep.
Have you looked into any sort of digital interfacing or MIDI controlling of your amps?
I had a couple guys ask, but I haven't. Occasionally I'll build a breakout box that will allow MIDI switching on my amps.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I haven't, and I've heard a lot of crazy things these days, like guys using balanced XLR outputs for the amps, and a lot of people ask me for headphone outs and stuff. But I mean, what I'm doing is basically recreating more vintage stuff. So
Right.
I think some of those options could probably be really cool, but at this point, like I haven't kind of worked them into the design. But
Every little move takes a lot of R&D, right? I mean,
yeah,
you've got your
and
day to
time.
day.
Time is the thing, man. Everything takes so much time, and the design work, and you got to end up building stuff. What I usually do is build stuff by hand first, get your prototype ironed out, and then you kind of do all the design work, and even for like just like my tube amps, like we're talking like, dude, I do like 3D. You got to do like 3D modeling and all that kind of stuff, and for CAD drawing, and get the chassis right, and get all the metalwork figured out. And it would be like crazy doing something like the aux box. There'd be a lot of work going into that too.
It's a super fun piece of gear. It's one of my favorite things that I've gotten recently. For sure,
Yeah.
easily. It's changed the way I do my program, for sure. Like my cover song videos.
I've heard some of my customers that have will throw so much power at those things that they'll actually wear out their output tubes of their amps. Because
Really?
you can take like 100-watt amp and crank it, and get this just wild, like
Oh yeah, dude.
wild tone. But your amp still your amp is still cranked, so you can go through output tubes. But hey, man,
Apparently they're rated to take 150-watt amp up to
yeah,
150 watts,
that's cool.
which is pretty great. I mean, you should have one. You should get one.
Yeah, I might do that.
You know, not to encourage you to take your work home, but when you go home, you wouldn't have to play the acoustic. The kids would be
That's
asleep
right.
and you'd be in your do you have a little den? Do you have a den? Do you have
Yeah,
a
yeah,
space?
got a little area, a
Yeah.
little guitar area.
There you go.
Of
See?
course.
It's your aux den.
Yeah. No, those things were crazy too. Like everyone was buying them with the pandemic, like lockdowns and stuff.
Oh yeah, you
Guys.
couldn't get one.
Yeah.
They were out. I got on a waiting list. It was like a Dumble.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Sweetwater was like, "Fuck off! Don't call me, otherwise you go to the end of the
Send me some tapes of your playing.
line." Send me pictures of your amps if they're not cool enough.
Yeah, if your amps aren't worthy, you're not getting an aux.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have the desire to get into any other pedal designs, like things that do like modulation or delays or anything like that, or tape echoes? God, there's someone out in Australia that's making these echoplexes now that
Oh
are
yeah.
I just stumbled upon them. I don't even know how on Instagram, you're just like thumbing through there looking at gear. There's
Yep.
someone in Australia that is just like, they started by making parts, for old echoplexes. And now they build one and it fetches a pretty penny. I mean, there's a lot of design work that goes into that. And it's a lot of work, but it's such a cool thing that a pedal is just never gonna, like a modeling pedal can be cool, but it's just never going to do the exact same thing.
How big are those things?
What the old
How large are they?
Echoplexes?
Yeah.
Oh, they're they're the size of an aux box.
Yeah,
They're
that's
like
what I thought.
12, 10, 12 inches by 8 inches, maybe a little shorter. Maybe they're 10 by 6 or 8. And yeah, I mean, they're sizable, but they'd sit up on the side or up on top of an amp. And
Yeah, I've never really been much of a pedal guy. Like I have a drawer of pedals. I have a big drawer in my toolbox of like pedals I've traded for. I've always, I want to have a pedal board. I've never had a pedal board, but I do
really,
like a good delay. Yeah, man,
yeah,
I'm an amp guy. I just do amps, but I love a good delay and I love reverb. I get the reverb from the amp. I usually throw some delay in the loop. But I've never really been big into pedals. And I feel like, I build right now, like everything I'm building is hand built. Like, and I
yeah,
love having like a big sort of like almost like a canvas, to paint in
sure,
when I'm building something, and I don't get that same feeling with a pedal. Like I just feel like I got the big bloom, and I've built 500 or 600 of those by hand over the past like 6 years, and they're PCB. Like I got a little PCB in the pedal, but they're all hand wired, and so they got like leads that comes off the PCB. I just don't get that same feeling. Like when I'm building something little, it's got a transistor. Like I don't get the same satisfaction. So I don't know if I'll really ever get into the pedal thing, but I think maybe something you're talking about, like that's Echoplex or some sort of
I'll see
space
if I
echo
can
could
find
really
it.
be cool.
I'll see
Yeah.
if I can find the link and send it to you. It's pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
I mean, my skill set is more of like crafting the gear with my hands. And I do some design stuff, but some of these guys, especially the pedal guys, I mean, they're making, the whole thing's PCB. The pots are on the PCB board. You know, they're manufactured. Anyone's putting them together. You slap it in a box and you know, ship them all over the world. And I felt like my gear has
500 of
always
those you've
been,
made.
what's that?
500 of those you've made.
Yeah,
That's great, man.
I know. Yeah. I don't really make that many of them anymore. Like I probably do like, I don't know, maybe 10 a month. Um, my focus has really been on the amps, but you know, they are still cool. People love them. But I do kind of, I'd rather sit and put an amp together than build 10 pedals, you know?
Right. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Are you big into effects?
I mean, I'm the target market, man, of
Yeah.
everything. You know, I'm into whatever is right in front of me right at the moment. So I have a bunch of pedals, you know. I mean, this showed up in the mail the other day. It's like a analog synthesizer pedal,
Okay.
Pigtronics thing. And it's cool, you know, but it's not a synthesizer.
Yeah.
Um, I needed to be able to make a synthesizer sound for a video that I'm making, and I can't play the synthesizer, so that'll do.
You remember those like big multi effects units that would have like a wah on board, you get like a boss and have like 80 effects in it?
Oh yeah.
Those were cool. I used to have those when I was a kid. You'd go and there'd be so many different sounds, like octave things, and you find the presets. And I remember it would always be like, you know, the whole thing was you could create your own, you know, effect and then save it.
Right.
And I could like never figure it out. Like, you know what I mean? You find this like awesome sound and be like, oh, I saved this under preset, you know, 140. And you come back the next day and it would be something completely different.
Right. Yeah, traditionally I've been terrible with like interfacing with any sort of digital thing. Although they're getting a lot better.
Yeah.
Back in the day, because you had like you know, a tiny little 8-character screen, and you had to use you know, a scroll up and scroll down button, and that's all you had. You had to like rename it that way. It's like using a Apple TV remote now. It's
Yeah.
terrible,
Right.
right? That's what those
Dude,
things were.
they got amps now that have like you can Bluetooth from your phone
Oh yeah.
and control what's going on in the amp.
Yeah.
It's just wild.
I mean, I don't want to get that close to my amp with my phone because it starts making crazy sounds.
Yeah, those weird beeps.
Yeah. Is that Bluetooth?
I don't know what that is.
I know. It's just, yeah, no, it's crazy. Um, well, man, I can't. I'm gonna watch a bunch more demos of your amps.
Yeah, RJ did almost all my amps last year, and he made some great videos.
I met him at NAM last year. Do you do NAM? Do you do
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I met him at NAM last year too, and that he was doing some work at I think he was in the guild booth maybe. I can't remember where he was playing, but man, he's such a tasty player. Yeah, we went to NAM, and I was hoping on going again this year, man. You know, I was really just looking forward to getting out of the cold and going to
Right.
California for a couple days. But
Is it? Did you get blasted with snow today? Because we got blasted with snow.
yeah, I haven't looked outside in a little while, but it was snowing this afternoon.
I was driving and it is terrible.
Yeah,
Surprised the fire alarm didn't go off.
we've had it pretty easy though. We've only had a couple of storms.
Right.
There was literally no snow on the ground earlier today.
Yeah. No, I think we got a couple of inches.
Yeah.
Not too bad. Well, man, I really appreciate you taking so much time to talk to me. Sorry if I hit you with a bunch of weird, naive amp questions, but um, you know, when I hear things that sound good, I know that they sound good, and especially if they're exceptionally good. A lot of things sound pretty good, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, there's always a reason for it though. It's that, you know, that attention to detail, making the gear, you know, sound its best. And it starts with the design work and goes as far as, you know, how you put it together.
Pretty good is pretty good, but really good is really good.
Makes a huge difference. I really appreciate the time from you as well.
Hey, do you have any photographs of yourself with an amplifier or two, or any promotional type photos that you have laying around? You could send me to
Yeah,
cut them up and make some posts.
I'll shoot you over a picture tonight.
Awesome. All right. Listen, thanks again. I had a great time.
All right. Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it, man.
Have a great evening.
All right, we'll talk soon.